My name is Franklin, and I'm an atheist.
How would you know at all if you're being accurate?
I've read a lot about religion.
What exactly does through Jesus Christ mean?
What is it about their religion that resonates with who they are? It's not an anthropomorphic being. Is there an enemy? How does their religion make them a better person?
Can you explain to me and anybody who doesn't know what a mitzvah is?
What do they think is missing about how we understand the world?
What would be the difference between praying on a subject and just thinking on a subject?
Why don't people have superpowers anymore?
I think it's important to talk to them and find out what they believe.
Hello everyone. Today I'm speaking with Christi, Nabil, and Akin, who are members of the Baha'i faith. I'm speaking to three people since the Baha'i do not have clergy. Thank you to everyone who's helping out on Patreon. The links are here and down below in the thingy. Enough all this Star-Spangled Banner. Let's play some baseball. Or, I'll get to the interview now.
Hello and welcome to the What They Believe series. Today I'm speaking with members of the Baha'i faith. If you're saying, I don't know anything about the Baha'i, that's exactly the point of this series. Today I'm speaking with Christi, Akin, and Nabil. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, I guess for all three of you, were you born into the Baha'i faith or did you convert?
I converted.
I did too.
I was born in a Baha'i family in Egypt, but then, I had to accept the faith for myself.
And for Akin and Christi, what were you before you were in the Baha'i?
So my mother was Muslim. My father was Christian. My mother perhaps my spiritual guide more, even though I wasn't, I wouldn't say I was Muslim. I felt like I was close to the Muslim faith. But I grew up initially in Nigeria and I went to school in England, and my mom was very clear in her encouragement that I embrace. She said, whatever it's got to do with God, it's good, embrace it. So you're going to a Christian country, embrace the Christian faith and participate.
I was born right here in North Carolina into a Baptist family, brought up in the Baptist church, loved my upbringing. And about 18 years old, I knew I was searching for something different. I wrote a paper. It was my religious autobiography. And at the end, my conclusion was, I still have a lot of questions and I don't have any answers, but I will be patient and I know I will find them. And in 10 years, I found the Baha'i faith.
I understand that Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad are all recognized by Baha'is. Tell me about the concept of the manifestations of God.
There are more than those you mentioned. We go back to Moses and Zoroaster, Krishna, and more. The manifestations are divine luminaries. God speaks through these to mankind at different ages, and they bring a message depending on the maturity of that time, of that civilization. The manifestations all have certain characteristics. They all have innate knowledge. Christ, at 12 years old, he was explaining religious philosophy and principles to clerics who were amazed. And he never went to school to learn these things. They reveal holy writings. And the purpose of the holy writings is to guide us towards God, to give us light in the dark so that we know who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. They transform society. That's their purpose, is to transform society, make it better.
Yeah, I'll add something. So we use the word manifestation because the function that these divine beings, luminaries, bring to us is to manifest the light of God in our lives, in our existence, in the context of our daily living. And that manifestation, like I said, is within the framework of where mankind has developed to, or the culture in which they're manifested into has developed until. So it's it's exactly what a teacher does. They teach to our level.
The idea of a manifestation is that we can't look with our eyes into the sun. We get blinded. But we can see the reflection of the sun. And in a perfect mirror, we can see that reflection. And so the idea of a manifestation is a reflection of the true creator to us, because we're incapable of comprehending the creator. You know, God is unknowable to us.
I've read that Baha'is are persecuted, especially in Islamic countries. Do you have an explanation for this, and have you ever personally experienced this?
I probably can answer that a little bit. I was born in a family that was Coptic Christian, that they became Baha'i. And the idea that, you know, for a Christian in Egypt to recognize the Prophet Muhammad is, you know, incomprehensible to people. How can a Christian say, I believe in the Prophet? So my parents actually did, because they became Baha'i and accepted Islam. And my father was imprisoned in Egypt because of his faith. And my sisters and my uncle, my aunt, a whole family at different times was imprisoned. The idea is that anything that comes after Islam, Muslims think that this is the end, and there's no prophet that would follow the Prophet Muhammad. He said he's a seal of the Prophet, and therefore nobody else can come later. And similar to in Christianity, where they say, Christ says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, nobody, you know, this is it. So people interpret these things so narrowly that there's nothing that will come after. And so they think that Baha'is are heretic. And, you know, my father once was in court, and he had a tattoo that was tattooed on his wrist with a cross. And in court, they said, Baha'is defile Islam. My father stood up and he showed them the cross, and he says, I can say that there's no God but God, and Muhammad is a prophet of God. Is that defiling Islam? And there was silence in the court. The court session was postponed. Now, in most Muslim countries currently, Baha'is are treated decently. They don't have their full freedom, except in Iran and in Yemen. In Yemen, certain parts of Yemen are under the Houthis. The Houthis are a Shia group that get directions from Iran. These are the areas where there is a great deal of persecution.
Yeah, I read about in Iran, they destroyed a Baha'i graveyard, which Nabil mentioned. I'm not sure if I can even comment on that as
Right.
who would defile a graveyard. So I guess that's my only comment. What kind of person would do that? I'm sorry. I try not to editorialize.
We understand, yeah.
Well, currently, even people, Baha'is that are having farmland, they're farmers. They confiscated their farms.
Yeah.
They closed Baha'i shops. Baha'is are not eligible to work in any government positions. They are not allowed in universities. They're trying to suffocate the Baha'i community from livelihood, all sorts of livelihood.
I was unfamiliar with the Baha'i faith until recently, and perhaps one of the reasons I and people like me don't hear much about the Baha'is is that there's a prohibition on partisan politics. I'd like to know, how far does that go? Would you be allowed to run for public office? Do you vote?
I always vote.
Yes.
That's the only way we can make our voices heard for what we believe is right. But no, we don't take to the streets to proclaim one party against another, or ideologies. And in Baha'i elections, everything is silent. There's no electioneering, so we don't get involved with American electioneering.
And would you be allowed to run for a public office?
We don't run for public office. You probably have to be a party member here of some sort to do that. I am registered as unaffiliated.
There are instances where Baha'is are asked to appoint it to a specific function in a government. We will do that, as long as it's not requiring us to put on the mantle of a partisan stance of the government. So as you'll find a lot of Baha'i technocrats serving in the UN and places like that, and that's those kinds of things that, as I understand, the fundamental principle that we're trying to propagate is the oneness, is unity, and there is a principle and a statement in the Baha'i faith, in the holy writings, that says, through the clash of conflicting ideas, the spark of truth is born. That means that when we gather, we want all points of view. Partisanship is the opposite. It wants to suffocate out opposing points of view, so only its point of view is there. So that it's fundamentally, it doesn't work for us. What we're trying to do is get all the points of views together, so that through that we can figure out what's right for us all. And that is exactly the point. It's also the underlying reason why there's no proselytizing in the Baha'i faith. We're not trying to promote our view. What we're saying is we have something to share that we think is good for all of us.
And we do support community programs like Mecklenburg Ministry, crisis assistance, the homeless shelters and things like that. So we do support those things, but those are not partisan issues. Those
Right.
are human issues.
We also are heavily involved in the Baha'i international community. It's heavily involved with the United Nations to work towards peaceful objectives. So quite often they prepare papers for discussion, for social economic changes, for re-examining the charter of the UN,
Yes.
for all kinds of things about
Yes.
global governance. They're heavily involved in that. Just another reason why you probably haven't heard about Baha'i faith until recently is Baha'i faith is not that old. It's the newest world religion on the stage, and the numbers are not huge. There's no country where there's a majority of Baha'is at this time, probably with the one exception in Samoa, but that's really, the Baha'is are not encouraged to congregate, they're encouraged to spread.
Okay, I may be phrasing this one poorly, but I've read that Baha'is have prohibitions against homosexuality, but that only applies to people in the Baha'i faith. Can you explain that further?
We accept all people into the Baha'i faith. Anyone who is a believer in Baha'u'llah is welcome in the Baha'i faith. We make no distinctions based on sexuality, race, gender. If you believe in the holy writings of Baha'u'llah and you want to follow his teachings, you are a Baha'i. And we do have teachings, and we are all on our own path, and we strive to do our best.
Also, that exactly as Christi says, Baha'u'llah brought this revelation for all of mankind. The purpose of that revelation on one level is to effect a transformation in human condition. And the transformation of that human condition means that the way we are today is not the way we will be in the future. Just like every manifestation of God has come and has affected that transformation in our morals, in our society, in the way we conduct our lives. So every Baha'i is on this journey. And the animating influence of that journey is the belief in Baha'u'llah. Every Baha'i is at a different level of that journey. But one of the fundamental teachings that sparked my curiosity in the faith and drew me to the faith was that there is no clergy. There is no authority that's going to assess whether your faith is strong enough or not. There's so many things that we've been asked to do and that's where we focus our attention on the things that we can do in conformity. The other stuff that maybe we shouldn't be doing, that stuff is a personal consequence of an individual trying to grow themselves in a way that they can manifest those things those things better. The point is, we're all souls, and we're here to encourage each other, and that's the key.
You mentioned that you don't have clergy. I've spoken to a few other people that their religion also doesn't have clergy. My first question is always, who conducts weddings?
It's administrative. They're administrative functions, and the holy writings have the rituals that are incorporated in that. We don't have a lot of rituals in the Baha'i faith, but so in conformity with administering it along those lines and making sure it is in conformity to what the state wants to happen, that's how we go about it.
You know, there in every community there is an elected spiritual assembly. There's an administrative order that looks after the affairs of the Baha'i community, but it's not an individual, it's an elected council. We call them spiritual assemblies. And the spiritual assembly has the authority to perform weddings and so forth in accordance with the laws of the state.
Right. And in that marriage, they're witnesses. They have a function there as witnesses. I just wanted to add something Nabil said, the local spiritual assembly and the elected body. So we elect, as Bahais, we elect those bodies. And just touching on the partisanship or non-partisanship of the faith, it's important. One of the things I found most striking about the faith when I came to it was that in Baha'i elections, the first tiebreaker, if you have a tie, the first tiebreaker breaks to the minority. If you have two people with the same amount of votes, whoever is the minority, who represents a minority, is the first tiebreaker, and which is opposite to partisan, right? But it fits into the whole idea that we want to hear from everybody so that we can get the right, so the spark of truth can come, because just because we've drunk our own Kool-Aid doesn't mean we're right about it, right? So we want that. So that's one of the things that, for me personally, coming to the faith, I was like, I got to find out much more about this.
And we don't talk about, oh, I think this person should be elected. Oh, what do you think? I think, this one should go to the assembly. It's just never discussed. And that never occurred to me. I've been a Baha'i for over 40 years. And, I never thought too much about it until a friend of mine said, well, are you going to vote for your friend Elaine? And I said, I don't discuss my choices. We never do. It's totally silent. Everybody decides for himself. It's a secret ballot, and then the results are announced. And if it's an issue by the assembly, the majority wins, and everybody else joins in. Yeah. Even if you were not part of that majority vote, we have a responsibility to unify and support the majority vote.
Yeah, no nominations. It's an amazing system. No nominations. It's not for the glory of being a member of the assembly. It is for service. Yeah. The whole thing. And service towards unity. It's not service for, to put it in your resume or anything like that. You wouldn't know who members are of the assembly or who are not. Right. You wouldn't know it. People don't advertise that. It's totally humble. Assembly members are humble servants of the community and of the larger communities, including, the wider community, not just Baha'is.
And unpaid.
Okay, this is a simple yes or no question. What is the nature of the soul?
That cannot be a yes or no.
Maybe is the answer. Maybe.
This is a profound question. Does anybody want to try to tackle it? I have a short summary for me that fits. I see my soul as accompanying my body, not in my body, but associated with my body. And Abdul Baha says that the soul is like a sun shining rays on the body, and that these rays are the properties of the soul. And the properties of the soul are imagination, thought, understanding, and memory. The body and the eyes and the brain, along with the properties of the soul, give us things to function in this world. And that's how I see the soul.
It is the entity within us that recognizes our creator. So it's this motivating force within us that wants to reach towards our creator. That it is associated with us, with our bodies, but it's not captive within the body. So it transcends the body.
Do you have a concept of sin? And if so, what is sin?
One of the ideas that again drew me to the faith was this idea that there's no such thing as the original sin, that you don't inherit sin. And in the way that it's explained in the writings, it's not very just for creator to hold another soul responsible for what somebody else has done, right? So that doesn't come forth with the forms of justice. The things that we often think of as sin, in the writings, it makes it clear that there are some things, a lot of these things are due to ignorance, and that one of the roles we have in this world is to bring enlightenment. And that when people get enlightened, then, it's that whole thing about do and don't. And get enlightened, then they move towards the do's. And that the idea that a sin is this burden that can never be relieved is not one that we don't think about it that way. Baha'u'llah says to let each morning be better than each evening be better than the morning before, and each morning be better than the night before. So it's an ever advancing. That's the work we have to do to try to keep moving forward.
In the Baha'i writings, it emphasizes the nature of humanity. The human beings are created noble. So nobility, it's emphasized everywhere in the Baha'i writings, that we look at each other with the eye of nobility. We treat each other as that we created noble. Now, that doesn't mean that our actions are noble, but that's what we're capable of, and that's what we have to aspire to. And it's so when we talk about what Akin was talking about as the realities, the qualities that we aspire to, that there is really, defining the bad qualities by the absence of good qualities. For example, evil is the absence of good. Mm-hmm. Evil doesn't exist by itself. Like blindness is the absence of sight, or illness is the absence of health. So these things don't exist by themselves. They're the absence of something good. So our function is to create that goodness as individuals, and to help one another in creating that common good in each other, so the community can impact individuals as well.
And what is the Baha'i belief on the afterlife?
I think Akin just answered that. He said that it's similar to the fetus in the womb. It doesn't know why it's growing arms and legs, because it has absolutely no use for it, or eyes, or nose. They don't use them, but these are there as being an incubator for this world, and we are an incubator for our souls to flourish. And to the extent that we develop our spiritual capacities, then we can function better or progress towards the divine attributes and the divine presence.
And we do pray for the souls of the departed, that God will have mercy on them and that they will advance in the spiritual kingdom.
And interestingly enough, those departed also pray for us.
And they pray for us.
Right. So there's this. So the afterlife, it's a continuum. So Baha'u'llah talks about that the soul will continue to advance through all the worlds of God without it. It has a beginning, but it has no end.
I'd like to thank my guests, Christi, Akin, and Nabil, for joining me here today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Ooh, thank you for having us.
Here's the thing. What is this? If you said England or Great Britain, you're mostly wrong. And if you said Japan, you're way off. This is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, mostly called the United Kingdom for short. Just this is England. And if you add Wales and Scotland, you get the island of Great Britain. Not a country, just an island. To summarize, England, Great Britain, United Kingdom. But of course, there's also the British Commonwealth, which includes most English-speaking countries. 33 countries at the moment, 16 of which are part of the Commonwealth realms. This is getting complicated for this thing. So you know what? Here's a different thing. Throughout my life, I've heard a lot of jokes and general disparaging comments about the potability of water in Mexico. People refer to it as Montezuma's revenge, although a better term is traveler's dysentery. It wasn't until I began traveling myself that I realized this was a bit unfair to Mexico. I've experienced similar symptoms traveling to European and African countries. A friend of mine from Germany had the same problem in Dayton, Ohio. It could be from E. coli, a norovirus, or even differences in how the water is treated by municipal services. And people living in these places can often drink the water with no ill effects. Location is not the problem, the traveler is. Thank you for watching, and may the road rise with you.